In the town of Melun, France, Sophie and Vincent Pascal run a modest butcher shop. However, their marriage is not going well, and Sophie loses her patience with her husband when he takes too long to prepare an order for a customer, Mrs. Coignard. As soon as the customer leaves, the couple begins to argue, until suddenly, a group of men wearing animal masks throw paint all over the store. These men are vegan activists, who often harass butcher shop owners in the region. Furious, Vincent captures one of the activists and removes his mask, but the man is saved by the rest of the group, who knock the butcher to the ground. After this incident, Vincent and Sophie go to lunch at the home of a couple of friends, Mark and Stephanie. They also work in the meat business, but they have managed to stand out in the industry, with meatpacking plants and butcher shops scattered throughout the country. During the meal, Mark begins to brag about his success and even gives Vincent a new gun as a gift. Not only that, but the madman decides to test the gun right there, shooting a rubber duck floating in the pool. This only makes the atmosphere at lunch even more uncomfortable, but everything gets worse when Sophie and Vincent leave and start arguing again. Sophie is tired of her husband's neglect and indifference, as he can barely pay the household expenses and does not give her the attention she deserves. She says she has decided to file for divorce, but Vincent is distracted when he sees a young man riding a bicycle in the middle of the road. He immediately recognizes him as the activist who attacked his butcher shop, and in a moment of rage, he reverses the car and runs over the young man. Faced with the crime he has just committed, Vincent thinks about calling the police and saying it was all an accident. However, Sophie knows that this will not work and remembers her favorite TV show about the country's most notorious criminals. One of them became known for scattering the victim's body in different locations, and she suggests that Vincent do the same. Afraid of being arrested, the butcher agrees and takes the body to the store, where he begins to cut it into pieces. After work, Vincent puts everything in the freezer and goes to lie down in the bedroom, but Sophie tells him to sleep on the couch, as she is still determined to file for divorce. The next morning, Vincent is exhausted, having spent the night unable to sleep, next to Chubster, his pit bull. Sophie then goes to open the store and THR alone, but hours later, Vincent remembers that the activist's body parts are still in the freezer and rushes there. When he arrives, he asks where the piece of ham he had stored in the freezer is. To his horror, Sophie has sold it to Mrs. Coignard, who shows up shortly after, asking for more pounds of ham, as it was the best she had ever tasted. To make matters worse, Sophie is curious about the taste of the meat and asks to try a piece. Faced with the insistence of the two, Vincent cuts a slice and gives it to Sophie, who likes the taste and asks where her husband got this new merchandise. The man then makes up an excuse, saying that the ham was made with meat imported from the Middle East. Sophie immediately suspects that something is wrong, but even so, the two sell the piece to Mrs. Coignard, who begins to spread the word to her neighbors about the new flavor. As soon as she leaves, Sophie confronts Vincent and demands to know where the meat came from. The man then reveals that it was part of the young vegan, which he intended to get rid of little by little, along with the rest of the spoiled products. He then thinks it best to throw everything away, but Sophie refuses, as the flavor is very good and the product could increase the butcher shop's sales. Vincent thinks this is crazy, but another customer shows up and asks for more slices of the new ham. Seeing the chance to make a lot of money, the butcher couple starts selling the merchandise, which becomes a hit in the region. When night falls, Vincent decides to try the meat for himself and is surprised by the unique flavor. Sophie notices this and joins him at the table, saying that with this new meat, they can still save the store. However, Vincent says that the rest of the merchandise is already gone, but Sophie replies that they need to get more. This makes him think, and Vincent begins to consider the idea of filling his butcher shop with meat from more vegan activists. The next morning, Chloe, the couple's daughter, goes to lunch with her family, along with Lucas, her new boyfriend. The problem is that the young man is also vegan and won't even allow Chloe to eat meat. The couple then tries to offer other dishes, such as cheese, eggs, and cake, but Lucas refuses, as they were all made at the expense of innocent animals' lives. The young man's radical attitude soon makes the couple uncomfortable, and as soon as Lucas and Chloe leave, Vincent makes a decision. He is willing to capture more activists to use them as merchandise and calls Sophie to a restaurant in search of new victims. Arriving at a vegan restaurant, the couple tries to disguise themselves by looking at the menus while analyzing the customers. However, none of them seem to be the ideal choice, and they are about to give up when the waiter comes to the table and asks if they have already ordered. Not knowing what to order, Sophie asks for the house special, and the waiter asks the restaurant owner, Stefano, for help. Upon seeing the man, Vincent and Sophie immediately realize that he is the ideal victim and think of a way to capture him. After leaving the restaurant, the two begin to follow Stefano, and Sophie says she will go get the car while Vincent finishes the job. Then, as soon as Stefano enters his house, Vincent pulls out a huge cleaver and runs after him. When he sees the armed man, Stefano screams and scares Vincent, who starts pretending to be crazy and runs away. He then rushes back to the car, and Sophie is disappointed in her husband for failing once again. She tries to think of another way to attract victims and decides to go to a vegan movement demonstration. The next day, the two go to the streets, pretending to be defending the animal cause, and end up attracting the attention of an activist with a punk hairstyle. He supports the couple's stance and invites them to join an attack he is planning in support of the vegan movement. Sophie readily accepts, and the three agree to meet in a deserted location, but hours later, the punk shows up at the agreed location with his van, bringing two friends, Camille and the young Hemera. Upon seeing the two guests, Vincent decides to cancel the plan and return home, as he refuses to attack women. However, Hemera says she has obtained the keys to a famous meatpacking plant and they can sabotage their business and spread the vegan message across the country. The couple discovers that this meatpacking plant belongs to none other than Mark and Stephanie, which makes Vincent change his mind. The two then go in the punk activist's van, and on the way, Camille says she recognizes them from somewhere. He asks where the couple works, and Vincent lies, saying he runs a flower shop in town. The conversation continues and they arrive at the meatpacking plant, with the group telling Vincent and Sophie to hide their faces with animal masks. They also hand out protective clothing and weapons such as bats, lighters, and clubs to destroy the entire establishment. As a friend of Mark and Stephanie, Sophie refuses to participate and asks to stay in the car, while her husband follows the others and breaks into the place. Once there, the group destroys the entire establishment, which makes Vincent very happy to take out all his frustration on Mark's business. After destroying the place, he and Sophie go to a restaurant, but she is still angry that her husband destroyed her friend's business. In addition, she calls him a coward for not capturing the young activists when he had the chance. Vincent is furious at the accusations and even pulls a knife on Sophie, but he soon calms down and leaves the restaurant, saying that he accepts the divorce and will leave the meat business behind. After the argument, Sophie remains in the restaurant, where she is served by a young waiter. The two begin to talk and realize they have a lot in common, including their taste for TV documentaries about criminals. In the middle of the conversation, Sophie discovers that the young man is also vegan, but works in a conventional restaurant to pay the bills. Sophie then sees an opportunity to save her store, and after the young man finishes his shift, he offers her a ride. She accepts and the two arrive at her house, with the waiter saying that he really enjoyed meeting her at the restaurant. Sophie is also attracted to the guy and the two kiss, but in an act of impulse, she ends up biting the waiter's tongue. The guy quickly starts bleeding, and Sophie apologizes, saying she will take care of his injury inside the house. Upon entering, she goes to talk to Vincent, who demands explanations about the guy she invited, but Sophie says she attracted the young vegan to be her next victim. Upon learning that the two kissed, Vincent throws common sense aside and promises to eliminate the guy with his sharp cleaver. However, he also realizes that it is not a good idea to attack him now, because if he stresses the victim too much, his meat will become tougher and unsuitable for sale. Vincent then tells Sophie to take care of the young man and keep him as relaxed as possible until it's time to deliver the final blow. Even in the face of this bizarre situation, Sophie agrees and takes the guy to her couch to rest for a while. She then says she's going to get a bucket and heads to the kitchen, where she tells Vincent that it's time to attack. However, the guy changes his mind again and says he won't eliminate anyone else. This only makes Sophie even more disappointed, as she understands that her husband is not willing to save the business or even their marriage. Vincent does not try to argue and just goes to the living room to ask the young waiter to go home. However, he is surprised to see the guy completely naked and waiting for Sophie. Realizing the waiter's intentions, Vincent knocks the man down with a punch and finishes him off by hitting him several times on the head with a vase. Seconds later, Sophie appears, surprised by what has happened, but before she can say anything, Chloe calls her parents from the other side of the door. With no time to lose, the couple hides the body behind the sofa and welcomes their daughter, who is sad about ending her relationship with Lucas. She says that the young man dumped her because he believes she is secretly eating meat and going against the vegan movement. Because of this, Chloe asks her parents if she can sleep at home, but Vincent quickly sends her away, saying that she should make up with Lucas and join the vegan movement. With that problem solved, the two rush to deal with the waiter and clean up all the blood on the floor. Then Vincent and Sophie begin to dissect his body together, and despite everything, this experience brings the couple closer and closer together. After working all night, the two fall asleep on the couch when they receive a call from Stephanie. She tells them that one of her refrigerators has been attacked, and the couple goes there, where they find the police investigating who caused all the destruction. Among the investigators is the same police officer who bought the ham at Vincent's butcher shop. He analyzes the security camera footage, but everyone was wearing masks and there is no way to identify them. Vincent is relieved to hear this and decides to go home, but first, the police officer says he wants to buy some more of his Middle Eastern meat. Seeing an opportunity to resume business, he and Sophie agree to sell the merchandise and, using the waiter's leftovers, they replenish their entire stock. As soon as they open the store, the police officer and several other customers line up to buy the meat until the entire stock is sold out. Mrs. Koignard asks for more, and Sophie promises to get a new shipment the next day. Vincent has no idea how they will get more meat, but Sophie reminds him of the vegan restaurant owner. Hours later, the couple breaks into the man's house, knocks him unconscious, and ties his hands and feet in the bathroom. At first, Vincent hesitates to finish him off, as he seems like a good person, but Sophie insists that this is the only way the store can continue to operate. The butcher agrees and, with his sharp cleaver, he eliminates Stefano, securing a reserve supply for the next few days. In no time, the butcher shop becomes a huge success, with customers lining up every morning. To keep the stock up to date, Vincent and Sophie start hunting more vegan activists, using the shotgun Mark gave them as a gift. One night, the two are sitting in the back of the car, waiting in front of a nature park. Suddenly, a tall young man named Winnie appears on the scene and, like the other victims, he is a vegan activist who wants to fight for the cause. The couple takes advantage of this and tells him that they have summoned him on an important mission to destroy a famous meatpacking plant in the city. First, the young man needs to pick up a mask, and Sophie asks him to choose one from the suitcase in the car. While Winnie looks at the masks, Vincent unzips his jacket and pulls out the cleaver from under his clothes. However, just as he is about to attack, Winnie realizes what he is going to do and defends himself, striking the madman below the belt and fleeing into the forest. Fearing that the young man will turn them into the police, the couple runs after him, but Winnie manages to lose them in the dark forest. The couple fears that if they let him get away, they will be caught by the police and begin to search everywhere for the young man. Suddenly, Sophie has an idea and calls Winnie, with the couple listening to his cell phone ringing from behind one of the trees. Upon being discovered, the young man tries to run away again, but due to the effort, he falls to the ground, already lifeless, after suffering a massive heart attack. Faced with this tragedy, the couple feels guilty, but their remorse soon turns to satisfaction when they realize that he is excellent merchandise for the butcher shop. The next morning, the two take some of his meat to Mark and Stephanie's house so they can try their new product. Like the other customers, the couple likes the taste, but Mark chokes on a strange object in the food. Upon closer inspection, Stephanie says it is a pacemaker, which only makes the couple more suspicious about the origin of this meat. Mark then asks who supplied the goods, but Vincent covers it up, replying that he can't reveal his secret to a competitor. Mark takes offense at this and starts bragging about how much he has sold at his company and that Vincent will never reach his level. In response, the butcher accuses Mark of selling low-quality meat and even calls the couple snobs. Irritated, Mark jumps off the table and falls on top of Vincent, who tries to defend himself but is beaten by the man. Their wives tell them to stop fighting and Mark lets go of Vincent, but he attacks him by surprise and the two fall into the pool. Vincent then ends the fight by biting Mark's ear and leaves, leaving Stephanie and her husband frightened by the man's violent behavior. With each passing day, Vincent is becoming more aggressive and obsessed with capturing his victims and filling his meat supply. Sophie continues to support her husband and, despite the number of eliminations, she believes that the police will never catch them, as there is no trace that can incriminate them. One afternoon, the two go to a vegan festival in search of more victims, when they encounter Chloe and Lucas. The young man does not like to see the butcher couple at the venue, as he believes they are only there to mock the vegan cause. In addition, he suspects that the eliminations and disappearances of activists are being caused by butchers and meat suppliers in the region. Because of this, he tells the couple to leave the event and finally leaves, alongside Chloe. After the argument, Vincent and Sophie leave discreetly, but unbeknownst to them, Camille was sitting nearby and heard the entire conversation. Upon returning to the car, the butcher thinks it best to leave and not draw any more attention, but Sophie sees a young vegan woman leaving the event. Even though he is against the idea of eliminating women, Vincent is convinced by his wife to capture the young woman and take her body back to the butcher shop. Later, he begins to dissect the victim's body, but ends up breaking his cleaver and goes to the kitchen to get another one. Suddenly, the police officer knocks on the door and asks if he has any more ham to sell. Vincent replies that the store is still closed, but the man insists on coming in and says he is curious to know how the butcher got that meat. In addition, he comments on some rumors about the store, which has begun to grow, at the same time that vegan activists are disappearing. Vincent says he has no information about this and asks the police officer to come back in the morning, as he will reserve a special piece of ham for him. After the officer leaves, Vincent returns home and tells Sophie that the situation is becoming increasingly dangerous. However, their conversation is interrupted by someone knocking on the door, and they discover it is Lucas, Chloe's boyfriend. The young man has come to apologize for the way he acted at the event and to say that he is concerned about the rumors about the activists. In addition, his relationship with Chloe is not going well, and he asks the couple for advice. Sophie comforts Lucas and tells Vincent to go to the kitchen and get what he needs to help the young man relax. Understanding what his wife wants to do, Vincent refuses and tells Lucas to leave as soon as possible and make peace with Chloe. As soon as the young man leaves the house, Vincent realizes that this whole business has gone too far and decides to end the meat sales once and for all. The next morning, people line up to buy more of his new product, but Vincent warns them that the merchandise is sold out and will not be restocked. Everyone is disappointed, especially Sophie, who wanted to continue the business and again calls Vincent a coward. The butcher is enraged, saying he did everything he could to save the business and his marriage, but despite everything, his wife continues to belittle all his efforts. Seeing her husband hurt, Sophie rushes to apologize, but Vincent doesn't want to hear her and leaves, along with his dog. Feeling guilty, Sophie begins to collect all the merchandise from the store when she suddenly comes across the punk activist, alongside Hemera and Camille. Later, Vincent returns home and sees the same van as the punk activist parked next to the butcher shop. The trio took Sophie to the store's freezer and, after torturing her, they demand to know the whole truth. Sophie refuses to talk, so Camille grabs a machete and prepares to slit her throat. However, at the last second, Vincent appears on the other side, along with his faithful pet, Chubster, and armed with his machetes. The two then launch their attack, with the huge pit bull jumping towards Camille and biting him in a very painful area. Hemera then advances with a knife, but Vincent finishes her off by throwing his cleaver straight at her head. Finally, it's time to face the punk, but he proves to be more agile and attacks Vincent with punches and kicks. The butcher begins to stagger and the guy pierces him with a skewer, leaving him stuck to a huge piece of meat. With the punk about to deliver the final blow, Sophie breaks free from her bonds and thrusts a sharp hook into her opponent, piercing his skull. With the fight over, Sophie rushes to help her husband and the two embrace, amid the bloodbath they have created inside the freezer. Days later, the TV show about famous crimes begins a new edition, this time talking about none other than Sophie and Vincent Pascal. The couple, who became known as the Butchers of Melun, were captured by the police, thanks to Mark and Stephanie's report. According to reports, they eliminated more than 30 vegan activists and were sentenced to life in prison for their crimes. In a great irony of fate, Sophie, who always admired the criminals who appeared on the TV show, ended up becoming one of them, alongside her husband. Although they saved their business and their marriage, the two will now spend the rest of their lives behind bars. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.